Thank you very much. Last conference of the day. Let's try and make it a good one. Yeah, I'm Harry Wood. I have been involved in OpenStreetMap for a long time. It's kind of the best way to introduce myself, I think. And I want to talk to you about notes today. I don't mean this kind of notes, writing things on pieces of paper, notes. This would be an interesting talk, actually. I quite often, when I'm introducing OpenStreetMap to people, I'll point out to them that the process of gathering data for OpenStreetMap can be as simple as writing down some scrappy bits of notes on a piece of paper. It's quite a fun thing to point out to beginners. But that's not what this is about. OpenStreetMap notes. So hopefully, I imagine the vast majority of you know about OpenStreetMap notes already. If you don't, it's that little feature there on the OpenStreetMap website. You can add a note to report something that is missing or wrong on the map. And you don't even need to be logged in to do it. So this is great for getting, like, imagine you're living in this neighborhood here and you've seen that cafe that used to be a Costa has turned into a Ross. You can write a little note here, say, there's a new cafe here. So that's a beautiful, simple idea, which came about back in 2009, I believe it was. I think user Zav developed the idea originally, called OpenStreetBugs, separate website called OpenStreetBugs. And I just remember at the time kicking myself that I hadn't thought of this idea. It's one of those ideas that just has this beautiful simplicity to it. And it's very easy to develop as well, of course. It's just a database of people's comments and stuff. Yeah, really brilliant, I think, actually, the idea. And then somebody called Emka rewrote it shortly after, and then it lasted until 2014 before we loved the idea so much that we managed to bring it into the OpenStreetMap website more directly. And of course, you can see the notes other people have added on there. So this is the idea for if you're an OpenStreetMap who knows how to edit and fix notes, then you enable the notes layer. But one of the problems with this notes layer is it doesn't work very well if you're in a place where it's crowded with notes. So I live in London and I'm using the notes layer a lot in London. And it's kind of frustrating to me that if you zoom out slightly, it starts fetching a lot of notes. I think it shows a maximum of 100. And what it does is it sort of, I don't know if it's random, but it removes some of the notes that you're looking at as you zoom out. And if you keep zooming out, it doesn't manage to fetch very wide bounding boxes as well. So you end up with this sort of weird sampling of some of the notes showing. So I think the zoomed out display of notes is always something that we struggle to get a good view of. Because in this view here, there's probably tens of thousands of notes. So we're only seeing a weird sample of 100 notes in there. So what's the solution to that? I think if you say to most people that you've got tens of thousands of data points, and you want to show them on a map, they'll probably suggest marker clusters as a simple solution. Actually, if you go to mapcomplete.org, which is, I think, the OSM Belgium community made this really neat tool, MapComplete. So they've had a good attempt at showing a nice zoomed out overview of where the notes are. But I don't know, whenever I see marker clusters, I always feel slightly disappointed. It's like there's a better cartographic trick for showing lots and lots of points, and that is a density map. And this is looking terrible on this projector. Is this the light switch? Hopefully we can make it look a bit better, but it's got a black background, so you can start to see a little bit of density there, can't you? Okay. So this is the thing I wanted to unveil for the conference. I'm quite proud of it because I always wanted to know how to make a density map like this, and I decided to learn how to do it for my talk. I don't know, I think probably I'm talking to quite a few GIS experts here, so that you could do this in your sleep in at least 3 different ways of making a density map. But yeah, I learned how to do it, and I'm quite pleased with myself because I always wanted to be able to particularly create this style of map, which, as I say, doesn't look great with the lights on shining, but having a dark background and then having particularly the most dense areas of the map really popping with this kind of electric zing style of density maps. Oh, there we go, we're starting to see it now. Can't see me anymore, but but that's fine. That's fine. I mean, actually, I'm going to. What I'll do is I'll go to the web and show you the zoomable version of this. So harrywood.co.uk. Whoops. There maps, notes. So here we go, there's a few things on this URL. And here we have a density map. So I have made it as a tiled layer. We can start to zoom in and see all the notes. And I made it as two different layers, one for closed notes, one for open notes. So what we're seeing in green is closed notes over all time. And then layered on top of that, because there aren't as many, is open notes in red. So that's currently open notes. So you get this kind of effect. Every city, for example, if you look at London, which is where I was most interested in seeing it, you can start to see, it gets a little bit pixelated once you zoom in. So I've gone up to zoom level 9, but it looks like that at zoom level 9. You get this effect of lots and lots of green notes, because that's notes over all time that have been closed, and a center of open notes. So yeah, as I say, I'm pretty proud of that. And now that I know how to make density maps, I'll probably start mapping all kinds of data like this. So there's some interesting patterns you can see. Apart from generally cities have lots of closed notes and a few open notes. You can pan around this map and take a look, and I recommend you do it on a screen where it shows up a little bit better. I was looking at it and thinking, well, when you zoomed right out, this is a map of where the populations are, like any density map ends up being. But it's also a map of where OpenStreetMap's most active. So you can see that struggle a bit in China, and then there's the usual thing that the Western Europe is fizzing away with lots of activity. It feels like America's slightly less active. Although actually America's interesting, because if you zoom in on an individual city, like I think this is Chicago here, isn't it? You can see that it's not doing too bad. That's probably about the same with London in terms of a history of lots of closed notes, and maybe they're doing better in closing them there as well. So yeah, feel free to have a zoom around and spot some patterns here. Most places are very green with a little bit of red. There are some interesting places where it's very red. Noticeably, the whole of Burkina Faso, somebody's been, I want to say importing, but I think they've been doing it manual actually, gradually over time. They've been adding lots and lots of notes, and absolutely nobody is closing any of these notes. It's just a note for every village from a places data set. So that's interesting. I feel like maybe we should be working with them to figure out how to close those notes and transfer them into place nodes within the actual map data. But yeah, lots of interesting patterns.
Are people just using notes as labels?
Yes, it could be that this person is confused and they think that that's how you map villages. So it could be worth getting into a conversation with them. How do I get back to my slides? Here we go. So yeah, you could probably turn the lights up a bit again. So this is the bash script that I have for making it. I did it using the GDAL tools. Is it GDAL or Goodle? I should call it Goodle, shouldn't I? And as I say, I've always wanted to learn how to do this, and I finally got it. And the fun bit really in this is defining the color ramp. So you can see that there's a definition of red, green, and blue levels, and the alpha transparency level. And this is the number of notes that corresponds to. So it gets more and more green. And then to get that kind of electric zing effect, you want to define a bit where it fades out towards white. Just when you've got lots and lots of data on those pixels. What else can I say about that? GDAL to tiles, the last step. It's quite handy because it gives you a little leaflet map to. It generates the tiles and then gives you a little leaflet map to browse around with them. But I had to, my bash script actually does that twice, once for the green tiles, once for the red tiles. Slightly different settings for them both. So I suppose going back to the thing of cluster markers and that kind of thing, I suppose one of the ideas I had in my mind was what would be a better way of showing zoomed out stuff on the OpenStreetMap website. So I think it'd be quite interesting to put that into a pipeline and have it updated somehow, and show that in the zoomed out display. The green bits would have to be slightly different because what you want is to be able to transition from the markers that are red and green into the density map. But for the green ones, you'd want only the last week's worth of closed stuff, not closed stuff over all time, I think. But yeah, that could be fun. So let's talk about other stuff to do with notes. Another way of getting a really nice overview of notes is this tool. There's loads of really interesting stats tools on Pascal Nice's website. But when you go to the notes section, you get this. On the overview page, everything on the right is to do with the last 10 days of activity on the notes. And this is a ranking of country by country, who's doing the best with notes or who's doing the worst with notes. What do you think? It's showing the number of notes that you've got open, which, do you want to be high on that ranking? I don't know. Germany is winning and UK is coming second, but that is the number of notes you've got open. So when you look at the graph for the UK, it's my first response to seeing that is I'm a little bit worried that we've got too many notes and we're opening more and more notes and we're never going to close them. But you can see that our churn rate, our activity in closing and opening is building up as well. So I think on the whole it's pretty healthy actually. It doesn't really bother me that much that there's a lot of notes left open. Like some people want to close all the notes, but to me, when I find a note that's 8 years old and I figure out how to solve it, that's quite satisfying. Now you may have noticed while I was panning around on the density map that there's a big green patch in quite a few places. So Netherlands and Belgium particularly noticeable that they've gone very green, which means they're using notes a lot. They closed a lot of notes and they don't have many open. They don't have many of the red opened ones. And you can see that in Pascal's graphs here as well.
I think that might also be related in the Netherlands to some vandalism issues from people closing notes.
Could be some vandalism going on there as well. Okay. Maybe some of these big upward spikes are people abusively adding a lot of notes in some circumstances, but it's also very noticeable that these countries have been getting quite organised about trying to close a lot of notes. So you can see this wiki project describing the thing and coordinating people in Belgium to close notes. They've had face-to-face meetups where they bring the laptops and concentrate on closing the notes. I think this wiki page is quite good as well for talking about some of the processes around it. For example, they're mentioning using hashtags within notes and talking about survey needed hashtag, for example. So I think it's quite an interesting idea. But in general, it's very, very clear that they've been getting organised about closing stuff. And more recently, you may have seen the Latin American community talking a lot about notathons, which I think we need to give them a shout out for coming up with a fun name for it at least. And there's a nice blog post about it on the main blog. And you can see in Colombia they actually closed all of the notes completely, which is interesting. It means they're treating notes in a slightly different way to the way we treat them, I think. So this leads me on to kind of this business of whether a note indicates that you need to go there to solve it. For me, the right-hand side of this picture is the thing I'm most excited about, actually. But let's talk about the left-hand side a bit. So the idea of running notathon events obviously implies that you can just close notes in quite a lot of circumstances, certain types of notes. The one type of note you can close is if you've got something that's a bit kind of abusive, and we've all seen, if you've been playing with notes at all, you've seen some notes of various forms which are abusive. So you can hear somebody here is being a bit foul-mouthed, complaining about something. And there's my comment resolving it, which I don't know if you can read these very well. It's not really important to read the details, but I do like to write something when I'm closing a note. And I think there's a good principle of kind of assuming good faith a little bit. Even if somebody's angry and sweary, maybe you could help them a little bit. And one of the main things you can help people do is go to the contact channels wiki page to find a better way of contacting us, because it's not really that great to be dumping notes on our map in the wrong place. Well, I was curious as well, how often does the F word crop up within the opening of notes? The answer is there's only 2 currently open with swear words. Well, with that particular swear word. And actually only 265 overall, which I was quite surprised how few that is. I think what may be going on is that our hardworking DWG have been hiding quite a few of the notes as well. So any analysis that I do on the notes dump is not going to pick up on hidden notes. I don't think, I mean, it's clear they don't always hide sweary notes, but I think probably they've hidden quite a few of them. So here's another type, I suppose you could say, which is just nonsense. So somebody's gone on there and they've written hi. That's all they've written. And as I say, I think a good thing to do is assume good faith, and particularly this kind of thing, I would interpret that as an experiment. So you can thank them for experimenting with notes. It worked. They managed to place a note. And you can see here, I found this one, which was like 11 years ago, where I've been very patiently explaining to them something. But I think that's probably a bit over the top. And I want to make it clear as well that I think probably there's people who are a lot more hardworking than me at dealing with this stuff. They've been dealing with abusive notes of one form or another. And yeah, this is an anonymous note. So it's highly unlikely that anyone's going to come back and read this. So it's a complete waste of time. And so I hesitate to recommend anyone bothering doing this, but this is certainly an illustration of this idea of assuming good faith, which I quite like, but yeah, it's a waste of time. Yes, indeed. If you've really got nothing better to do, then you could try assuming good faith. But I think maybe you could, if you are involved in closing a lot of notes like this, then using standard snippets, not custom written snippets, but standard snippets of text to paste into all of them would be a good kind of systematic way of closing notes. But I don't want to lecture anyone on how to do this, because I actually don't really get involved in closing these kind of notes that much. So kudos to the people that do, basically. Then there's stuff which you might call spam. I think we overuse the word spam. So I want to talk about abuse more generally. So here's an example. Somebody's written, we're putting a link to their estate agent's shop. And they've put it on a residential building quite near where I live. And I think they're probably kind of trying to drive traffic to their estate agent shop, trying to get people who are interested in buying a house there to find it via notes, which of course is an abusive use of notes. But I think, again, you can still assume good faith and assume that they've kind of misunderstood what notes are for, basically. So again, you could spend ages explaining it. Maybe it's a waste of time. I think in this case they've said replacing misplaced notes. I suspect they might come back and wonder why it's been removed. So who knows? Maybe they'll see it. And what about good examples? So there are notes that we can remotely read, understand, edit the data according to what the information they've given us. For example, here I was reading this this sentence describing, which almost describes exactly what footpath we should add. My feeling with this is that it happens relatively rarely, though. It's relatively rare that people will write enough information into a note that I feel confident to make an edit in OpenStreetMap. But occasionally. And you can see that the length of the sentence, like if writing a lot of description is kind of one of the characteristics that makes it more trustworthy, as well, of course, when they're logged in, it helps. And a good practice thing, I think, is to link to your change set when you're closing the note.
In the intervening 7 years, nobody bothered to fix it.
No, it's quite an old one, that, isn't it? It's quite an old one. So that was talking about notes that maybe we can fix immediately. As I say, I'm kind of more excited about the other side of the things where you need to go and take a look to resolve a note. I've started thinking about it in these terms, and I've started thinking basically every note that I see is a fun little mapping puzzle, and something that you can resolve when you're out and about. And I use it to guide my mapping nowadays. So quite often, if I'm particularly in central London, I'll be wondering what I can do to add more data, and everything looks finished. So what needs mapping? And the answer could be go and close some notes. So to help me do this was kind of scratching my own itch, because I use organic maps a lot to day to day, just to navigate. You know, like that is my app for getting around with. So I wanted to bring the notes into that app that I'm using day to day. So I created a little tool. It's called the KML Notes because it exports the notes as a KML file. The format's not particularly important, but what's important is that when you download that onto your Android phone, it will automatically launch organic maps and show those as a layer within there, just like a layer of bookmarks. I think it works on iPhone as well. Not sure. And that works offline as well, which certainly it used to be. I used to be quite a cheapskate about using data on my phone, so it was quite good to have it offline. Disadvantage is that it's just a one-off import, so every now and again I have to remember to delete my bookmarks and just rerun it again to get a fresh set of data. So yeah, going to take a look. I think something that I enjoy about resolving notes this way, about going to survey, is sharing a photo. I think sharing a photo generally is a good way of working with other people, maybe to close a note. It gives you lots of visual data on how you're resolving these things. But it's also a nice clear indication that you have bothered to go and have a look at it. And I hope that it encourages other people to act in that way as well. I've been doing this on Instagram, and I just find it slightly entertaining that I'm doing the thing most people do of sharing stylish photos of things and this sort of thing, but then every now and again I'll throw in a traffic light. And as you can see, this photo of a traffic light was liked by my sister-in-law in Brazil. So yeah, clearly it has some artistic merit. So talking about photos, I think again Map Complete, the tool that OSM Belgium are developing, is quite neat for this. And I often wonder whether we could add a little camera icon on the OSM website to encourage people to solve notes by using photos. I suggested this to Tom, and he was horrified by the idea because it means we'd be hosting photos, which would be a bloody nightmare, wouldn't it? But if we could do it somehow, it'd be quite neat. And you can see that OSM Belgium have added a little camera icon there, so you could think of that as a little prototype of how it could work. But then again, I was talking about how OSM Bugs is OpenStreetBugs is a beautifully simple idea, and any little thing that you add onto the interface potentially detracts from the simplicity of the idea. You can see actually the Map Complete stuff ends up being quite cluttered because they've got a lot of interesting ideas on there. Like they're bringing in the Mapillary and Panoramax, anything nearby that's on Mapillary. They're rendering in an image, so instead of showing a URL to a JPEG, they'll show that as an image. Which, I don't know if we would want to bring that idea on the website. I think it's quite nice. But it does end up looking a bit cluttered, doesn't it, with all of that going on. But I think I might try and start using Map Complete more because it's bringing these things in conveniently. That note was actually an example of a note created within Street Complete. So you probably come across these if you use notes a lot. Unable to answer blah-de-blah-de-blah, and then you get a lot of notes saying that. So the Street Complete tool is responsible for 14% of the open notes at the moment, which I thought would be higher actually, because it feels like I'm coming across those all the time, but apparently it's 14% of them. But I do like the way it's encouraging people to take photos. So you'll see the notes like this with a URL to westnordost.de, which I think is the website of the guy that runs Street Complete. So the way I've started thinking about this is how do I widen my notes-free radius? Like I think about where I live and where I work, and how do I push back the boundary of closed notes? So I've even made a little tool just to illustrate the principle of this idea. Let me go back to notes. So I can click on the map here, and it's going to find the nearest note. But it basically just finds the nearest note. But it illustrates the principle of this idea of having a radius of notes, of clearing out the notes around a particular area. So I work in an office by Fleet Street here somewhere. There. So I've been working on my notes-free radius, trying to push back the boundary there, and also where I live. So I've made this little tool, and it's got a permalink feature as well. So the idea really would be that you share this on social media to show off your notes-free radius, and let's get everyone pushing back their notes-free radius. That's kind of how I think about what I'm doing with notes. It's actually how I think about what I'm doing with gathering address data for buildings and any kind of mapping really. But yeah, particularly notes. Pushing back your notes-free radius. So, oh yeah, so I was showing you this. This is the closest note to my office. So on my lunchtime walks, I've been clearing the notes, and here I've got one which I can't really clear because somebody's put it on a building site, and it's what we call a tracking note. We're keeping it open there because we're going to come back and check what it looks like when the building is built. Which I think is okay, I'm fine with that, but there was an interesting debate about it on the discussion whether that is a legitimate note. Should it be that you can always close a note, and if you can't close a note, then you should close it because it's invalid? Should we be annoyed that our notes-free radius has been shrunk? Or maybe if you're doing the thing like in OSM Belgium of trying to close all the notes in your country, what's your response to seeing a note like this? Do you get annoyed by it? So I've tried to kind of come up with this typography or categorization of all the notes. I've been talking about a few of these things. I think there's quite a few different categories of abusive notes. There is a category that's missing from this, which is hidden notes. As I say, DWG probably work quite hard on hiding notes, which are more extreme examples of abuse, where if you click on to report a note, then DWG guy, I'm pointing at Andy Townsend over there. So our poor hard-worked DWG guys have a big list of reports to go through, and they've got to decide whether or not to hide a note entirely. So that's another category that isn't on here. But generally you get these kind of bits of abuse. And then it's a question of whether something's poorly described or really well described. So I showed the example of something that's a big sentence, so you can see exactly what's wrong and you can make a fix. And I feel like actually it's not quite as clear cut as this. It's not quite a divide between survey needed and not survey needed, because if you get a poorly described note, it's a challenge that we can do remotely to try and maybe find nearby mapillary imagery or something that would allow us then to solve it, so it becomes a good enough note. Or otherwise, we can tag it as survey needed, and then it moves on to the right-hand side of this diagram, becomes a survey fix style of note. Oh yeah, out of time. Okay, yeah. So, actually, one of the main things I wanted to say about my experience of dealing with notes in central London is that we've got a very busy community of people who are willing to close notes remotely. And so you end up with a situation where all of the notes are survey needed, in fact. and this is one of the things I've discovered recently, is that the community has been so busy closing notes remotely that actually it ends up being quite a useful data source to refer to find interesting mapping challenges, I think. Basically, they're all survey needed, the ones that get left open. So I want to encourage everyone to go and take a look. So these are some of the ideas that I've talked about and some that I didn't get time to talk about good practice, if you've got time to do these things. But also, I would stress that it's supposed to be a really simple thing, so maybe you should ignore good practice suggestions and just get on with closing them. One final good practice, though, is it's slightly frustrating sometimes that you can't, after a note's been closed, you can't say thank you to the person who has closed the note. But if you find the change set where they've closed it, if they've made a change, then you can always comment on their change set. So my big recommendation there would be to say thanks on the change set. And on that note, thanks for listening. No time for questions? Or?
It was a quick question. I quickly want to add something on these long-standing notes with regard to building sites and projects that take a long time to get completed.
Yeah, the tracking notes.
I think for those, there's actually a quite elegant solution in the sense that in the wiki we have quite a description of construction-related tags, and there's also estimated end date, and that, to me, that allows really solving this note that says a building is being built here, and at the same time allows closing it. And
so we could say that you shouldn't.
The estimated end dates that have been expired.
Right. Yeah. So you could say that you shouldn't have a note for tracking that kind of thing because it's in the data as a construction site, but then we would have to get more organised about always looking at construction sites. And I think we should actually, in London, we should look at the construction sites and be on top of whether those construction sites still exist.
Good. One more last question.
I guess, is there an item to be quite brutal about notes? Let's say if someone said, a note from 10 years ago that says there's a business here, given the current turnover, you could say, well, it's probably long gone now. It's been gone. Would it ever make sense just to kind of close notes off? Because I was thinking, like open source projects, you can have issues that accumulate.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of, eventually you'll get swamped by the notes.
I've seen that suggestion a few times, maybe the time threshold of 5 years or something, and then we auto-close the notes. I don't know, I mean, it depends whether you... I'm trying to get people excited about the idea of solving these little puzzles that are everywhere, and if you have fewer puzzles just because you auto-close them, then that's a bad thing, in my view, in a way. But yeah, I mean, obviously, an anonymous note from 8 years ago it's less likely to be useful. That's certainly true.
Asking the originator of the note whether it...
Yeah. If it's anonymous, then it's probably not worth trying to reply to them and hope that they'll reply because it's so unlikely, unfortunately. But when somebody's logged in and they get an email when you reply, then it's more feasible, I think.
The other reason for hiding notes is if they contain personal data. So somebody will quite often, occasionally, you find people tag all their friends' houses inside the notes.
Bill here is another one who you also got access to the hiding feature, haven't you? Another DWG member here. So yeah, you're saying you hide private personal details. I guess you also have to hide. Has anyone done like copyright violation stuff within notes? I imagine that must happen sometimes. Well, it's not as common. Okay. There's this whole hinterland of features within the OpenStreetMap website that we don't get to see. Only the DWG guys get to see.
Right, I think we better stop there and bring things to a close.